In this video, a retired general shares his 75-year-old toy soldier collection. My name is Mark Silverthorn, and I'm the social media chairman of the Ontario Model Soldier Society. Today's video is part 2 of a video titled The General's Toy Soldier Collection, featuring an interview with retired Canadian Brigadier General Darrell. For those of you who have not watched part 1, I would encourage you to do so. If you watch to the end of today's video, we have a bonus feature. General Dean will share tips for retaining the value of your collection after purchase. So, General, have you ever done anything to reduce the value of one of your figures?
Yes, when I was young, a number of us used to play outside. And at that time, we all had BB guns. And so when we got playing with these toy soldiers and shooting at them, a lot of birds survived, but the soldiers didn't. And as I got older and started to buy my own toy soldiers via the monies I made in the paper route, you start to mature a little bit and realize I don't want to break these.
General, what can you tell us about this 88 millimeter anti-aircraft gun with searchlight?
Well, those weapon systems were produced by Hauser Elastoline. They came complete with wheels. In fact, there was a tracked vehicle that actually towed the guns, which I have. But the gun here is in the dismounted role. In other words, the wheels come off it and it sits and takes on its role as an anti-aircraft gun. Remembering that the German army also took these guns over from the Air Force at times and used them as direct fire weapons against tanks. They were very, very effective.
General, what can you tell us about this Hussar figure?
Well, I saw him last night when you'd asked me to add another figure, and this Hussar is an interesting fellow. One, because he's American, 3rd Hussar Regiment, and they were stationed in New York State. It's a 120 millimeter sized figure, very heavy. It's made by Alimer, and I have 3 or 4 of them. They kind of go in the background of my displays with the smaller soldiers in the front. But I thought they were really nice figures, nicely painted. And as I say, when you buy them, expect a shipping charge for the weight because they are heavy. They're a solid figure.
Next piece we'd like you to talk about is the Royal Canadian Dragoon.
Okay, that was my regiment. I served in 2 armored regiments, the Lord Strathcona Horse and the Royal Canadian Dragoons. Now, the Dragoons I was rebadged into in 1974 as a young major. And I commanded a tank squadron and a reconnaissance squadron. And during my time in NATO, in northern Germany, one of the things that they did was they had these figures which were purchased from Trophy Miniatures in London, and they're a larger figure. They're about a 90 millimeter figure. When the commanding officer had finished his tour as a commanding officer, these were presented to him, or this was presented to him, by the youngest soldier in the regiment. I was very fortunate. In 1982, I was chosen to command the Royal Canadian Dragoons in Germany. So that took me back for my second 5-year tour in Germany. And at the conclusion of my command, the youngest soldier presented me with that dragoon. But they were specially painted um, by Trophy Miniatures. I'm sorry, I said Trophy. Um, uh, it was a Tradition in London.
Oh, you mean Tradition of London?
Tradition of London, yeah. They were the ones that made the figure. Sorry, I mixed up Trophy.
The next piece we'd like you to talk about is your Soldat Condor League piece.
Right. The Condor Legion um, was a group of German soldiers, mainly Air Force, that were sent to Spain during the Spanish Civil War to assist Franco and the national forces. They provided aircraft. They did have some ground people, but mainly they were an Air Force organization. But what they perfected was actually working with the ground troops. In other words, the air-ground cooperation, which had never been developed in the First World War, but certainly the Germans were trying to develop for the Second World War, where the aircraft would be able to communicate with the ground forces. The ground forces could direct the bombers in or the fighter aircraft in to attack um, the for the other forces, the opposing forces.
The next piece we'd like you to talk about is the Aylmer Portuguese Volunteer.
Ah, yes, the Horatio. Now, these were interesting chaps, and if you look at that picture, he's got a fierce look on his face. So, Almer produced these about, I'm thinking, 3 or 4 years ago. And I found them such an interesting looking character that I bought a set of them. There's a flag bearer and four um, marching soldiers, goose-stepping soldiers with it. The thing I want to point out here is the base. It's quite a thick base because this Almer's figures get confused with another maker, but the Varetios were Portuguese fighters that went and joined the Spanish Nationalist Army during the Civil War in Spain, 36 to 39. Now, the reason that they went and joined the Spanish Nationalist side was because Antonio Salazar, who was the benevolent dictator of Portugal at the time, was under a lot of stress from General Franco of Spain. And Franco had kind of hinted that he was going to take over Portugal and the whole Iberian Isthmus was going to be his. But Salazar, from what I read, um, made some agreements with him that he would provide troops to help out Franco's soldiers. And there were several thousands of these Varetios went and fought with Franco. They never fought as a unit. They were used as individual replacements.
So, General, now is the time for our bonus feature. We'd ask you to provide us with some tips for retaining the value of your model figures after they're purchased. So, what could you share with us on that topic?
First off, don't paint them. A lot of folks do. They add things to them. So once you've taken that away, the value goes down quite a bit. The other thing is, and you're tempted to do it because of chipping or something scratches them and takes the paint off. Um, Nowadays, it's fairly easy to find paints that will um, cover scratches and dents and things like that. However, people use devices to find out whether they've been retouched or painted, and they will know that it has been damaged and it's recovered up. But the bottom line of it is just be honest. If there's something has happened to your figure and you want to sell it um, in an auction or wherever, or sell it to an individual, just be honest with them and tell them, hey, I've repaired this particular area. The other thing too, when you're collecting, and it depends on what you are collecting, and I refer back to the Hussar soldier that we just looked at, 120 millimeters. They're quite big. They come in a box. Um, and so once they're uncovered, um, the box normally disappears. If you can, keep the box. For the smaller figures, for the Britons type figures that come, uh, 7 marching figures and 5 horse figures, keep those boxes. The Britons boxes and the other boxes that various suppliers use, keep those boxes because those will retain somewhat the value of your purchase. Um, the Britons boxes now, the old ones, and those were figures that were made in the 40s and the 30s. If you've got a box to those, it raises the price of those figures up tremendously. You will regain your investment. The same really doesn't apply for new purchases. What I've found is that um, the new purchases, if you pay $150 for a box and you try and sell it, chances of getting $150 for it is not great, and you have to accept that fact. Um, but the older the soldiers are, and if the producers have stopped producing, um, that raises the value of those. I would recommend keeping them in a wall container, glassed in. It saves you a lot of trouble in the long run, cleaning them and dusting and doing all that type of work. Um, People tend to not put them in direct sunlight, depending on the paint on the figure and the maker. And direct sunlight may affect the paint and fade it. And then you're pushed into the problem of, do I repaint? And if you repaint, then the value goes down.